Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Aisling. You'll know it's me because I pretty much always wear this jumper. I swear it's clean. Today I'm going to talk a bit about poetry. I feel like it's like the nerdy side of reading. You know, a lot of people read and enjoy reading, or understand that people enjoy reading, but when you say that you really like poetry, they're like ironically, or do you actually like poetry? No lads, I love poetry. I think it's great. I've loved it since a very young age. I remember having a collection called Nothing Tastes Quite Like a Gerbil and other vile verses. I was mad into it. I learned a poem, I believe it could have been from that collection, and it went like this. What's the time? 10 to 9. Hang your knickers on the line. When it's dry, bring it in. Put it in the biscuit tin. Eat a biscuit, eat a cake, eat your knickers by mistake. Yeah, so I mean, we started from the bottom, the very bottom. We were, you know, encouraged in school to enjoy poetry, but I feel the encouragement that we got was more like, you better learn this or you'll be in trouble. Interestingly, I remember none of the poems that I was forced to learn. I feel like maybe the education system has really done a disservice to poetry. I feel like people are scared of it, they don't understand it. In saying that, here's my doggy. I am not scared of poetry, but I don't always understand it, and that's okay. That's okay. I really like contemporary poetry. A lot of the classic stuff I really struggle with, and I feel like a lot of the classic stuff is stuff that we were forced to learn. I'm gonna help my little dog up because she's 14 and she's not able to get up herself. Oi! This is Sally, and she's one of my best friends. And Sally really encourages people to read poetry too, as a dog who doesn't speak English, but that's okay. Hello girl. So I have pulled some books from my own shelf. I actually don't have that many poetry collections. When I went to pull stuff from my shelf, I was quite surprised at how little that I actually had. I feel like I really started to develop my love of poetry when I was in secondary school, or high school for those of you in the States, or Canada, or wherever calls it high school. We call it secondary school here in Ireland. My English teacher was not necessarily the best. She really liked poetry that rhymed, like A, B, A, B. I'm not into rhyming poetry generally. I like when it's used as a little bit of an effect sometimes, but generally it's not for me. So that's probably why I really like the contemporary stuff. So anyway, I pulled some of these books from my shelves. I feel like one of the first poets that I really started to love from secondary school was Elizabeth Bishop. I don't know a whole lot about Elizabeth Bishop's background. I'm pulling this from like my 15-year-old brain. I am more than double that in age now. But there was always a line in, I think it's a poem called Questions of Travel. I must look that up actually. And there's a line in it. It talks about the clouds spilling over the sides in soft slow motion, in reference to clouds kind of billowing down over a mountain. And maybe about 6 or 7 years ago, I was standing in the middle of the country at this viewing point where you kind of overlook another mountain, and there were clouds like literally billowing over the top of the mountain. I just remember like feeling like almost overwhelmed, and then this memory of this line popped into my head, and it just sits in my brain. And I just love that line. And I think that's the thing, you kind of really have to have an appreciation for specific words and the value that words have, and what words can really do to a person, and how effective they are. I mean, there's been so much change and so many revolutions based on words alone. So one of my favorite poets ever is my best pal, Sylvia Plath. I was introduced to Plath in school and I fell in love with her. I think my depressed little teenage brain really loved, I felt like I could relate to. One of my favourite poems ever is called Poppies in October, and it's in Sylvia Plath's Ariel collection. I also have just another collection of hers called Selected Poems. Poppies in October. Even the sun clouds this morning cannot manage such skirts, nor the woman in the ambulance whose red heart blooms through her coat so astoundingly. A gift, a love gift, utterly unasked for by a sky palely and flamily igniting its carbon monoxides, by eyes dulled to a halt under bowlers. Oh my God, what am I, that these late mouths should cry open in a forest of frost, in a dawn of cornflowers. Whew. I'm not going to discuss what that means. I mean, take from that what you will. A poor little heart. Next poet is Mary Oliver, and I have her Devotions collection, which I dip into really often. I was only introduced to Mary Oliver as an adult, and I feel like that's really sad. Why did nobody tell me that she existed? Why did I not find her? Mary Oliver wrote a lot about nature, an appreciation for nature, and I feel like maybe this is something I wouldn't have appreciated as much when I was a child or when I was a bit younger. I'm kind of only coming back around to the natural world as an adult now. I feel like as a kid I was forced out into the garden, into the muck, to help with the gardening, and my parents and my grandparents were so into nature and so into talking about nature that I resisted it so fervently, so ridiculously. Like, what was my problem? One thing that you might know, or will definitely learn if you follow along with me, is that I absolutely love my animals. We have 2 dogs and 1 little cat, and they're all old ladies. I'm gonna read this particular poem by Mary Oliver, and it's called Little Dog's Rhapsody in the Night, Percy 3. He puts his cheek against mine and makes small expressive sounds, and when I'm awake, or awake enough, he turns upside down, his 4 paws in the air and his eyes dark and fervent. Tell me you love me, he says. Tell me again. Could there be a sweeter arrangement? Over and over he gets to ask it. I get to tell. She reminds me to appreciate the little things, and I know that sounds so corny to be like, oh, appreciate the little things, but as somebody who, you know, became disabled later in life, you know, had to rearrange my idea of my future, and, you know, really had the rug pulled out from under me, this idea of appreciating what I have, what's around me, the little things, the things that aren't so little, but the things that we just don't appreciate. I feel like Mary Oliver is a really great testament to living a vast and wonderful life amongst what we have, and I feel like that's been an invaluable lesson for me to learn. It promotes happiness, this idea of gratitude, I think, and if that's something that you'd like to cultivate within yourself and you really like the idea of the natural world, I feel like Mary Oliver's poetry is really accessible, and this collection in particular is stunning. She does have some prose, some essays as well, some collections of essays, but I think I actually prefer her poetry. I suppose not so surprisingly, really. Next on my list of poets that I really love, and that I would love if you could love too, is Ada Limon. I have 2 of her collections, one called The Carrying and one called The Hurting Kind. Both are beautiful. I have read a blurb, Victoria Chang from the New York Times magazine, she wrote about Ada Limon, and she said something along the lines that Limon's poems give her hope, but it's not the kind of hallmark fake hope that we're used to. It's a kind of a hard-earned hope that's laced with, you know, either grief or happiness or both. I'm really paraphrasing, but I feel like that really kind of, you know, brings together what Limon's poems kind of are and what they do. Particularly for me, the thing about poetry that I really like is that we all take what we need from it. Different poems will reflect us back, and, you know, something that I might love when I'm 20 I might not love when I'm 60, because I'm obviously at a very different stage of life. Sometimes a poem will find you at the right time, and sometimes it will find you at the wrong time. And also it's about what you like yourself, isn't it? I'm going to read a Limon poem from her collection, The Carrying. It's called The Raincoat. When the doctor suggested surgery and a brace for all my youngest years, my parents scrambled to take me to massage therapy, deep tissue work, osteopathy, and soon my crooked spine unspooled a bit. I could breathe again, and move more in a body unclouded by pain. My mom would tell me to sing songs to her the whole 45-minute drive to Middle Two Rock Road and 45 minutes back from physical therapy. She'd say that even my voice sounded unfettered by my spine afterward. So I sang and sang because I thought she liked it. I never asked her what she gave up to drive me or how her day was before this chore. Today, at her age, I was driving myself home from yet another spine appointment, singing along to some maudlin but solid song on the radio, and I saw a mom take her raincoat off and give it to her young daughter when a storm took over the afternoon. My God, I thought, my whole life I've been under her raincoat thinking it was somehow a marvel that I never got wet. I love that. It's probably the poem that really made me realise that Vuong was a force to be reckoned with. And also it was in many ways a poem that I related to because I've got a lot of spine stuff too, and it's very easy to understand, you kind of get it, but I feel like that last line is a bit of a punch, isn't it? Okay, so the next one I have on my little lap is probably a person that needs absolutely zero introduction. This is the Time as a Mother collection by Vuong. I read On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous, Vuong's novel, a few years ago. I thought it was okay. I think I should go back and read it. Maybe it found me at the wrong time. This is a poetry collection that was released last year. My dad actually bought it for me when I had COVID, which was so lovely of him because I was absolutely dead when I had COVID. It was no joke. If you've ever read any Vuong, you know what to expect. It's very lyrical, it's very punchy, it's very kind of gutsy, he doesn't hold back, he hasn't held back. He is incredible, even to listen to speak in interviews. He speaks like his poetry. So from this collection, Time as a Mother, I'm gonna read a poem called Reasons for Staying. October leaves coming down, as if called. Morning fog through the wild ride beyond the train tracks. A cigarette, a good sweater, on the sagging porch, while the family sleeps. That I woke at all, and the hawk up there thought nothing of its wings. That I snuck onto the page while the guards were shit-faced on codeine. That I read my books by the light of riot fire. That my best words came farthest from myself, and it's awesome. That you can blow a man and your voice speaks through his voice. Like Jonah through the whale. Because a blade of brown rye multiplied by 1,000 makes a purple field. Because this mess I made with love. Because they came into my life, these ghosts, like something poured. Because crying, believe it or not, did wonders. Because my uncle never killed himself, but simply died on purpose. Because I made a promise that the McDonald's arch glimpsed from the 2 a.m. rehab window off Chestnut was enough. That mercy is small, but the earth is smaller. Summer rain hitting Peter's bare shoulders, the of it. Because I stopped apologising into visibility. Because this body is my last address. Because right now, just before morning, when it's blood blue and the terror incumbent. Because the sound of bike spokes heading home at dawn was unbearable. Because the hills keep burning in California. Through red smoke singing. Through the singing a way out. Because only music rhymes with music. The words I've yet to use. Timothy grass, Jeffrey pine. Celloing, cocksure, light lusty. Midnight green, gentle, water thin, lord, as verb. Russet, pewter, lobotomy. The night's worth of dust on his upper lip. Barren joy on the cusp of winter. The broken piano under a bridge in Windsor that sounds like footsteps when you play it. The Sharpied sign outside the foreclosed house. Seeking cat friend. Please knock for Kayla. The train whistle heard through an open window after a nightmare. My mother, standing at the mirror, putting on blush before heading to chemo. Sleeping in the back seat. Leaving the town that broke me whole. Early snow falling from a clear blush sky. As if called. I feel it really hard to talk about these because I feel like they hit me in such a way that might not hit you, or that you might not relate to, but he's so popular, and he's so popular for a reason. And maybe if you don't like poetry, that might be something that you might pick up even from your library if you're not too sure, if you don't want to spend the money. Or the next poet that I pulled from my shelves is Billy Collins. Billy Collins, again, is a poet that I only came across, sadly, as an adult. I used to listen to him read his poems on YouTube when I was, I don't know, maybe 19, 20. He's got a really lovely voice, and there's loads of his stuff on YouTube, so check him out on YouTube. Even sometimes if you're not really into poetry, sometimes it's good to listen to somebody read it out loud. It's a different thing. It becomes something else. It becomes something almost tangible rather than in a book. The Billy Collins collection that I have here is called The Trouble with Poetry and Other Poems. There's one poem in particular called Genius that I really like. Genius was what they called you in high school if you tripped on a shoelace in the hall and all your books went flying. Or if you walked into an open locker door, you would be known as Einstein, who imagined riding a streetcar into infinity. Later, genius became someone who could take a sliver of chalk and square pi 100 places out beyond the decimal point. Or a man painting on his back on a scaffold, or drawing a water wheel in a margin, or spinning out a little night music. But earlier this week, on a wooded path, I thought the swans afloat on the reservoir were the true geniuses, the ones who had figured out how to fly, how to be both beautiful and brutal, and how to mate for life. 24 geniuses in all, for I numbered them as Yeats had done, deployed upon the calm, crystalline surface. 48 if we count their white reflections, or an even 50 if you want to throw in me and the dog running up ahead, who were at least smart enough to be out that day, she sniffing the ground, me with my head up in the bright morning air. Thematically, quite similar actually to Mary Oliver. I don't believe that Billy Collins deals a lot with nature. Well, not to the degree that Mary Oliver does it. One of my favourite poems of his is called The Dead. There's a lovely reading of him reading it, and it's animated on somewhere on YouTube as well. So death is one of the themes of his work, but not in a morbid way. And how is death not morbid, you ask? It's a celebration of a life that's passed, from Billy Collins' perspective, I think, anyway. I really love his work, and I think he's definitely worth checking out. The last poet I'm going to discuss is a poet that my teenage brain just absolutely went nuts for. Like, pure depression. Loved this alcoholic man who felt like he had nothing going for him. Just really adored his words. Loved his novels, loved his poetry, just mad for him. The particular collection that I have, it's Charles Bukowski, and it is The Pleasures of the Damned, and it's a collection of his poems written between 1951 and 1993. This particular collection of this collection, I feel like my favourite is probably a poem called A Smile to Remember, but I'm not going to read it. I'm actually gonna read another poem. I also really love his poems that he wrote for or about or to Jane, so check those out as well. But the poem that I'm gonna read is one that I was really obsessed with when I was younger. It's called An Almost Made Up Poem. It's not in this collection, so I'm gonna read it from my phone. So, An Almost Made Up Poem. I see you drinking at a fountain with tiny blue hands. No, your hands are not tiny, they are small, and the fountain is in France, where you wrote me that last letter and I answered and never heard from you again. You used to write insane poems about angels and God, all in uppercase, and you knew famous artists and most of them were your lovers, and I wrote back, it's all right, go ahead, enter their lives, I'm not jealous because we've never met. We got close once in New Orleans, 1/2 block, but never met, never touched. So you went with the famous and wrote about the famous, and of course, what you found out is the famous are worried about their fame, not the beautiful young girl in bed with them who gives them that, and then awakens in the morning to write uppercase poems about angels and God. We know God is dead, they've told us, but listening to you I wasn't sure. Maybe it was the uppercase. You are one of the best female poets, and I told the publishers and editors, print her, she's mad but she's magic, there's no lie in her fire. I loved you like a man loves a woman he never touches, only writes to, keeps little photographs of. I would have loved you more if I'd sat in a small room, rolling a cigarette and listened to you piss in the bathroom, but that didn't happen. Your letters got sadder, your lovers betrayed you. Kid, I wrote back. All lovers betray. It didn't help. You said you had a crying bench and it was by a bridge, and the bridge was over a river, and you sat on the crying bench every night and wept for the lovers who had hurt and forgotten you. I wrote back but never heard again. A friend wrote me of your suicide 3 or 4 months after it happened. If I had met you, I would probably have been unfair to you, or you to me. It was best like this. That poem really brings me back. I couldn't tell you how many hundreds of times I read it and reread it and read it and read it. Tried to just make it become a part of me. Did you ever read something that it hits you so hard that you don't know what to do with it? You feel like almost like you could eat the page. I know that sounds really bizarre, but I don't know how to express it better than that. I feel like if I came across that poem today for the first time, I wouldn't love it in the way that I did. But this is what I've been talking about with the words finding you, sometimes when you need to find them. I think, as you can tell from the poets that I've spoken about, I really like sad poems, and that would be true. A special mention as well to, there is a channel on YouTube called Button Poetry, and there are a lot of spoken word poets, like really talented people. Rudy Francisco is one of my favorites as well. Check him out. I can't do his work justice because he's a spoken word poet and it's just so much better, so check him out. Also some Irish guys, Stephen James Smith, Emmett Kerwin, check them out as well. They're also spoken word, and again, I can't do them justice, so they're phenomenal, each in their own ways. Sometimes you mightn't like written poetry, but you know, the performance of it is just something else. So that's where we're gonna end it today. So I hope you've enjoyed it, not been freaked out by it, by me and me emo poems here in my sitting room. If you like this kind of stuff, you know, maybe give me a like, maybe give me a subscribe if that's the kind of thing you do. If not, no worries. I hope you're well, and I hope to catch you next week for another video. Bye bye.